Finally, our example here is for each of the following angles, I want to find out what quadrant it's in, and I want to find a coterminal angle between 0 and 360 degrees, or between 0 and 2 pi radians. So we've got 4 angles here, and I'm going to give you some in both degrees and radians. So we're going to start out with negative 5 pi over 4 radians, and then we'll do 735 degrees, negative 7 pi over 3 radians, and negative 510 degrees. So if you want, you can try those on your own. I'll help you out with starting with negative 5 pi over 4 radians. Okay, that's not between 0 and 2 pi radians. So what we're going to do is add a 2 pi to it. 2 pi is 8 pi over 4, so 8 pi over 4 minus 5 pi over 4 gives us 3 pi over 4. So let's graph that. Zero pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. 3 pi over 4 is between pi over 2 and pi. It's right there. So that's in the second quadrant. So our answer here is 3 pi over 4, and it's in the second quadrant. The way you can kind of understand how that came from the original negative 5 pi over 4, if you went in the other direction, 5 pi over 4 in the other direction from the traditional direction, because it's negative, you'd end up at that angle. So its coterminal angle is 3 pi over 4. It's in quadrant 2. 735 degrees, that's way bigger than 360. So let's drop down multiples of 360. We can actually take out 2 multiples of 360 right away. So I'm going to subtract 720 degrees, and we get 15 degrees. Well, if we write things in terms of degrees here, 0 is 0 degrees. Pi over 2 is 90 degrees. Pi is 180 degrees. 3 pi over 2 is 270 degrees. And 2 pi is 360 degrees. And 15 degrees is between 0 and 90, so that's right about there. And so what that means is that 735 would actually go out and circle twice and then end up right at the same place that 15 degrees ended up. So the coterminal angle is 15 degrees, and of course that is in the first quadrant. Okay, let's look at negative 7 pi over 3. That's less than 0, so I'm going to add 2 pi to that. Plus 2 pi, well, 2 pi is 6 pi over 3, so that would give us negative pi over 3. That's still less than 0, so let me add another 2 pi. And that's, again, 6 pi over 3 minus pi over 3 would give us 5 pi over 3, and that's between 0 and 2 pi now. We just have to figure out which quadrant it's in. So 5 pi over 3 is a little bit bigger than 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 is 1.5. 5 pi over 3 is like 1.67. So 5 pi over 3 is a little bit bigger than 3 pi over 2. Let me erase some of these extra angles. They're getting in our way. And I'll show you where 5 pi over 3 is. If you go between pi and 2 pi, there's 4 pi over 3, there's 5 pi over 3, and so 5 pi over 3 is right there. That's clearly in the fourth quadrant. Finally, negative 510 degrees. Where does that one end up? Well, that's definitely less than 0, so we'll add 360 degrees. And we'll end up with negative 150 degrees. Still less than 0 there, so we'll add another 360 degrees. And that gives us 210 degrees. And that's between 0 and 360 degrees, so we know we found our coterminal angle. 210 degrees is just past 180 degrees. In fact, it's 30 degrees past 180 degrees. So it's right there. So that's in the third quadrant. So just to recap here, finding these coterminal angles and finding out what quadrant they're in, to find the coterminal angle, you take the angle that you're given in degrees or radians, and you add or subtract multiples of either 2 pi radians or 360 degrees. And you add or subtract these multiples until you get them into the region, the range that you want, 0 to 2 pi radians or 0 to 360 degrees. And once you get it into those ranges, then you can break it down more finely and ask, are you between 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, or 2 pi? That tells you which quadrant you're in, or in terms of degrees, that would be 0, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, or 360 degrees. That will tell you what quadrant you're in if you're in terms of degrees. So that's the first of our lessons on trigonometry for Educator.com. Here we talked about angles. We haven't really gotten into the trigonometric functions yet. In the next lessons, we'll start talking about sines and cosines, all the different identities and relationships, how you use them in triangles. We'll talk about tangents and secants. So that's all coming in the later lectures on Educator.com.